Thank you, Shar. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to start the short presentation by the Navy, followed by the oral testimony portion of the meeting. So if you'd like to take a seat now, that would be great. We have more seating available if needed. My name is Allison Turner. I am the moderator of tonight's meeting on the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, Overseas Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, for the Hawaii Southern California Training and Testing Study Area. In accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act and applicable executive orders, the Navy has analyzed the environmental impacts associated with military readiness, training, and testing activities conducted within the Hawaii Southern California Training and Testing Study Area. There are two purposes for tonight's meeting. First is to provide information to the public, and second is to receive the public's comments on the Navy's proposal and the draft environmental analysis. Tonight is the fourth meeting that we have held this week. We started first in Oahu on Monday, Maui on Tuesday, Kauai on Wednesday, and we're here in the Big Island today, Thursday, and then we'll be having a meeting in San Diego on Monday. The Navy has prepared a short presentation, and as I said, verbal comments will be accepted immediately after. Here tonight to receive your comments are Captain Johnson from the United States Navy and Mr. Alex Stone, the EIS Program Manager from the United States Pacific Fleet. My role is to ensure that we have a fair and orderly meeting where you have an opportunity to make a comment on the draft EIS. Tonight's presentation and the verbal comment session are also being transcribed for the administrative record by Cynthia seated behind me. So we ask that the Navy presenters and the public, members of the public that are providing oral comments, please not be interrupted so that the comments may be accurately transcribed. At this time, I'd like to introduce Captain Johnson.
Aloha, Kako. Thank you, aloha. It's my pleasure to be here tonight and have an opportunity to speak with you and more importantly, to listen to your comments and concerns as we go forward with the environmental impact statement. It's my privilege to be the commanding of the Pacific Missile Range, Barking Stands, and it's my deep honor to be able to live in Hawaii, especially my island of, you can't hear me? My island of Kauai. So thank you very much again for having me here tonight. This is our last meeting that we're doing in the Hawaiian Islands. All the other meetings, they're very much, and I've learned here in my little over a year living in Hawaii is that when we have meetings like that, especially when there's strong opinions and disagreements, that we can do it respectfully and with aloha. And I just ask that we'll do that and you do the same this evening. So thank you. Next slide. When I was younger, I thought that what I did in the Navy, why was I in the Navy? It was to fly because I wanted to be a pilot, and that was my dream. Now that I'm older and probably my wife would argue not wiser, why I'm here, why we're in the Navy, I'm a steward of the nation's security, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I wear the nation's uniform. How we do that as a commanding officer of the Pacific Missile Range and in my current job is that we conduct training for anything, so our armed forces can handle any mission that may happen tonight, and then we do testing that allows them to put capabilities in their hand that allows them to continue to do that mission into the future. Next slide, please. So, realistic training. When you think the military and you see us in the uniform, obviously a lot of people instantly think the high-end World War I or a World. Yes, we do have to train and do realistic training for that eventuality or that you never know situation. But we also do a lot more. We do, especially over at the Pacific Missile Range and here in the Hawaiian Op area, we do anti-piracy operations training. We train maritime security. We do a lot of humanitarian assistance and disaster response training to include tsunami relief and hurricane impacts. Next slide. So the Hawaiian Range Complex, that's where the Hawaiian Op area and our temporary, maybe we should just go to the next slide, please. The Pacific Missile Range specifically, and that's the reason I was selected to speak to you, is the world's largest instrumented training range. So it is the best range in the world, the best area in the world to conduct realistic training. Now, and that's just a small portion of it. The Hawaiian Op area is the gold box that you see, and it pretty much encompasses the major Hawaiian islands. Next slide. The temporary operating area is that large gray box, and that area is 2.1 square nautical miles. The left edge of that, as you're looking at it, is the international date line. Now, it's a temporary operating area because we don't use it every day, but it's important as we figure out how much training or what the right amount of training is to do, that we understand environmental impacts, that we account for environmental impacts, and then also we also work with the FAA and other international and national organizations to ensure that we can conduct that training safely as possible. Next slide. I promised my wife tonight that she knows I like to talk, that I would talk less and listen more. One thing I would say is, as we go into the formal commenting period where you each are allotted time to speak, I won't be responding. I'm normally a very question and answer, open dialogue. But just for that, for the protocol of that, we'll just be listening. But afterwards, if you have a question specifically for me, I'll be around, and I just ask you, please come and talk to me, and I will hopefully answer any question that you have to the best of my abilities. I started off talking about how I'm a steward of the nation's security. I honestly and I firmly believe personally, and I think the Navy, the team here that has put together the environmental impact statement and does all the environmental work for us, shows that we can not only be a steward of the nation's security, but we can be a responsible steward of our natural resources, our cultural resources, and our community. And I think you'll find if you ask questions and you find a little bit more about what you do, that hopefully you would agree with me. But with that, I'll turn it over to Alex Stone here, and he'll talk some of the specifics about the environmental impact statement. Mahalo. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your interest in the topic, and you're taking your time to be here tonight. We always welcome an opportunity to talk about the testing and training that we do and about the environmental protection that we are so proud of, and I'll get a little bit more into that. Just a little bit more about myself. I'm Alex Stone. I'm a civilian employee of the Navy. I'm in charge of the environmental impact statement that we're here talking about tonight. I'm up here talking, but we have a whole team, as the captain mentioned, that are available around the room after we're done with our presentation and the testimony. So we really like this format, so I would invite you to take advantage of that and go and ask your questions one-on-one. Like I said, just like the captain said, I'm also going to be here, so we can talk afterward too. But we have some great posters, and so I welcome you to participate in that part of the meeting too, the poster sessions. Before I go through the presentation, I just kind of will reiterate what Allison said. We've released a draft environmental impact statement, and where we are right now is we're here to get your comments, your input on the draft environmental impact statement. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that in addition to being here tonight and providing your comments. But we've released a draft environmental impact statement, and that's kind of where we are in the process, and I'll talk about that. But if there's anything that you take away with this, is that we do want your comments on the draft environmental impact statement that's out right now. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically than the captain did about why are we doing an EIS, why did we release a draft EIS, and kind of what is the overall purpose of us doing an environmental impact statement, a bit about the activities that we're looking at. I'll talk about how the environmental impact statement also includes compliance with other processes, and a lot of those involve the National Marine Fisheries Service that we have a close relationship with. There's a representative of the National Marine Fisheries Service who has a poster station here, so I welcome you to ask questions about them because they're an important partner in this process. I'll talk about the environmental impact analysis that's in the draft EIS, a little bit about some of the resources we looked at and some of the conclusions. And then I'll really focus a bit on the mitigation measures, which is kind of, I think, one of the key pieces of the whole process. And that's where we've looked at all of the activities that we're going to do, the testing and training activities, and taken a look at how we can minimize environmental impacts where they've been identified. and I'll talk a little bit about what some of those are. And then I'll come back to the process, where we're gonna go from here after tonight, what's gonna happen with the comments you give us tonight and during the rest of the review period, what's gonna take place moving forward. Next slide. So the reason that we're doing an EIS, we did another similar EIS that was completed in 2013, and that EIS is associated with a permit that's valid through 2018 for 5 years. So we're working on the environmental impact statement to support a new permit that will be issued for activities starting in 2018. So we're on kind of this 5-year cycle that we're redoing the activities, redoing the analysis. The activities that we're looking at in this EIS are fundamentally the same as the activities in the previous EIS and consistent with the types of activities we've been doing in the same areas for many decades. So there's not a big expansion or change in the nature of the activities. There are some new activities, but they're really more of an evolution of technology and systems than a fundamental change in how often we're training, where we're training, or the impacts associated with that training. The other thing that the EIS, doing a new EIS allows us to bring in is the latest science. Since I said this is a 5-year process, during that 5-year time frame, there's constantly new science. And one of the things that we're really proud of is that our EIS is a science-based document that uses the best available science. So we update the science in the current EIS from the last EIS. Next slide. I mentioned the EIS, and that's kind of the overarching umbrella of why we're here tonight and the process, but it's important to know that it's not only the environmental impact statement. Associated with the activities that we're proposing, we also go through other regulatory processes, and we get permits under various different laws, which are listed up here. So the EIS kind of is the umbrella, and during the EIS process, we also do the compliance with these other statutes. Since this is an ETC document, most of these laws are under the jurisdiction of the National Marine Fisheries Service, who I mentioned. We have a recess? Maybe that was a message that I'm talking too much and I need to go faster. So, but no. So the National Marine Fisheries Service is our partner, and we have someone here tonight from the National Marine Fisheries Service. Next. So the EIS is a comprehensive look at all of the environmental resources associated with the environmental impacts. The biggest two areas that we look at in the EIS are the environmental impacts associated with sonar, sound in water, and the use of ordnance or explosives. And we look at the impacts of those activities as well as all the activities that we do on all the different resources. A lot of the focus is on the marine resources, of course, marine mammals, fish, but we also look at other activities, socioeconomic impacts on fishing, other uses of the ocean, cultural impacts, air quality. It's a comprehensive analysis of all resources that are affected potentially by our activities. Next slide. One of the real key elements about doing the environmental impact analysis is knowing about how the energy that we put in the water from the testing and training activity, how that energy moves through the water. So the Navy has developed a model that helps us accurately predict how the energy moves through the water, which allows us to do an accurate impact analysis. And that's something that we've developed across the Navy and allows us to really do a science-based analysis of what the environmental impacts are, so we can really document what are the environmental impacts of the testing and training activities. Next slide. Impact on marine species. There are potentially impact on marine species associated with these activities. The vast majority of impacts when we're looking at marine mammals are impacts where the animal's behavior would be temporarily changed. So that's the vast majority of it. The animal detects the sound and temporarily changes its behavior. The impacts that could be more severe, which happen closer to the activities, that's the area that we've developed mitigation, where we try and minimize those more severe impacts. The ones that are, the vast majority, again, are the temporary changes in behavior. Next slide. So what are those mitigation measures that I was talking about, that I was saying that really minimize the impacts, these more severe types of impacts that would be closer to the activities? Well, this to walk through some of what those are. A lot of them are based on lookouts. All Navy ships have lookouts at all times. They're highly trained. They are trained to look for marine mammals while we're doing the activities. If we see marine mammals in the area that we're concerned about for these more impactful type of areas, the activity is either delayed, moved to a different area. If it's sonar, we would power down the sonar or turn off the sonar if marine mammals are detected in that area. In addition to these type of procedural mitigations, which we're really proud of because we've integrated these procedures with all the other procedures, all the other activities that are taking place on a Navy ship or a Navy aircraft, we've integrated the environmental protection into all these procedures. But in addition to that, we also have developed specific geographic mitigation measures. And that's where we've looked at all the areas where the Navy tests and train and identified areas that have a biologically importance for certain species in different times of the year. And we have limitations on activities in those areas. And the next slide kind of shows some examples of the geographic mitigation in the Hawaiian Islands. Next slide. Back to the process. Most important thing about the process is that we haven't made any decisions. There's no finality to the project until we get to the very end of the process. Right now we're at a critical phase of the project, which is getting input. We went and did the analysis, and so now it's your opportunity to look at that analysis and comment on that analysis. We'll take all of those comments, we'll study all of those comments, and we'll develop responses to those comments. Where it's necessary based on the comments, we'll change the environmental impact analysis. We'll look at the mitigation measures that I talked about and whether they're adequate based on the comments we get. And then we'll put out a final environmental impact statement where you'll have an opportunity to see, this is a comment I provided, here's what the Navy's response is to that comment. You'll get a chance to see that. And all of this process, the public input, the comments, our responses, all of those are considered ultimately before a final decision is made on the EIS, which will be in that 2018, end of 2018 time period, which I talked about earlier, which is when the current permits that we're operating expire. So the process we're envisioning would be wrapped up by the end of 2018. Next slide, which I believe is the last slide. So Allison's going to walk through again a little bit more specifically, but this slide kind of talks about how you can comment. And there's different ways to comment. You can provide your comments here orally. You can mail them to the address here. You can provide them to the court reporter. You can do it online. All the comments are treated the same, and there's no benefit or penalty of being early or late as long as all the, or not late, as long as all the comments are received by December 12th. They're all given equal consideration. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Allison, and we're going to start the oral comment part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. The Navy welcomes public review and input on the analysis contained in the draft EIS, and we are now ready to begin the portion of the meeting which is the verbal testimony, which is your opportunity to provide comments. So I'm going to go through some ground rules. We have quite a few people that are wanting to make an oral comment tonight, so we started early to allow adequate time for everybody to do so. And I just want to go through the ground rules. So please keep in mind that the EIS process is intended to ensure that decision makers will be fully informed about the potential environmental impacts associated with the various alternatives before they decide on a course of action. The intent of the verbal comment session is to obtain your comments. It is not a debate nor a question and answer session. The Navy will accept your verbal comments but will not respond to them at this time. Responses to the comments will be provided in the final EIS. Comments on issues unrelated to this draft EIS are beyond the scope of this meeting and will be identified as such in the final EIS. To ensure the Navy gets an accurate record of what you say, please respect the following ground rules. First, speak clearly and slowly into the microphone and state your name and, if it applies, any organization that you represent. It will also help if you spell your last name. There's no need to provide any personal information such as your address or phone number because your comments are being transcribed verbatim and will be included in the administrative record. Every speaker will have 3 minutes to provide his or her comment. Speakers do not have to speak for the full 3 minutes, but may not yield any remaining time to someone else. I'll just call the next speaker.